Good morning. Welcome to Rising. We've got a great show for you today. Balce is off and Brianna will be here later this week. But today we have Olayemi Olurin back with us. So nice to see you, Olayemi.
It's exciting to be here, Robby. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. Well, we've got a lot to get to. Abraham Enriquez and Dr. Patricia Campos Medina will join to discuss some new polling data from Latino voters. And then also we'll get into, of course, Kanye West's deplatforming from Twitter and Instagram. But first, last Thursday, President Biden announced he will issue mass pardons for people convicted of possessing marijuana under federal law. The White House will also advise the Department of Justice to review cannabis's status as a Schedule I drug, where it's currently classified along with heroin, LSD, and ecstasy. Let's watch this.
As I said when I ran for president, no one should be in jail just for using or possessing marijuana. It's already legal in many states, and criminal records for marijuana possession have led to needless barriers to employment, to housing, to educational opportunities. And that's before you address the racial disparities around who suffers the consequences. While white and black and brown people use marijuana at similar rates, black and brown people are arrested, prosecuted, and convicted at disproportionately higher rates.
The announcement serves as an unexpected win for cannabis and criminal justice reform advocates alike. However, not everyone is completely satisfied. Policy experts told Rolling Stone that the pardon is set to cover at least 6,000 people who have received a federal possession conviction since 1992, but none of them are currently incarcerated. That's compared to the almost 40,000 Americans the White House says are currently serving time for other cannabis-related charges.
Criminal defense lawyer Dr. Rebecca Kavanaugh tweeted, quote, Biden's announcement is kind of smoke and mirrors because most federal prosecutions for marijuana are for sale or for trafficking, not possession, even when the amount of weed involved is very small. The pardon also fails to cover people who were in the country illegally when they were charged. So a more limited effect than it might seem at first, although certainly I would say a step in the right direction, something that many people who voted for President Biden wanted him to do. He's a drug warrior kind of guy from a long time ago. Obviously, his vice president is.
Right.
But this is a good trajectory.
I actually agree. I'm normally pretty critical of Biden, but actually when this news broke, I actually tweeted out that, if he does actually take marijuana off the federal schedule of drugs and he pardons these things, that will be a significant step in the right direction. Although I want to be fair. In fairness, there are lots of people that are not going to be positively impacted, right? It shouldn't just extend to people who possess marijuana, but also people who have sold marijuana too. I also think it's important that he encouraged the states to do similarly with state convictions, because that's where most possession cases are handled on the state level. The federal government actually doesn't prosecute these things, which also I think is relevant when we look at who this will impact, because more likely, not only are this only 6,500 people from 1992 to now, but they probably have other charges and other things, right? The federal government generally doesn't handle these kinds of possessions, so it probably won't have as positive of an impact there. I would say the people who would most stand to benefit from a law like this are immigrants. Federally, the federal issue, immigrants are often deported. Many immigrants have been deported or made inadmissible because of things like this, but unfortunately, the specific caveat on the law excludes them. So I'm wary of just how impactful it will be, but I want to give credit where credit is due, and this is still a positive step.
For a drug that is treated like heroin, like LSD, et cetera, that is not addictive, does not like kill. I don't know where are the bodies, the marijuana bodies. I don't know. There's dozens of them. I don't know.
It's decriminalized in 31 states already. It's legal in 11 states. We already just pop cultures in our social values. Marijuana just isn't. We don't view marijuana the same way we did, and it's absurd that there are people, thousands of people all over this country sitting in prison for selling marijuana on the state level, but also and possessing it on the state level. So I think we have to take consideration to that. It is good because I think the federal government making a statement that they're going to back off from marijuana in a particular kind of way will encourage states to act similarly. But I think it's important to look at the scope of what will actually happen, what still needs to happen.
And there are people who are in pain.
Yes.
For whom cannabis can be a substitute for other, help them deal with
Right.
chronic pain and can be a substitute for far more harmful things
Right.
like opioids,
Right.
which are our whole drug problem right now is these kind of inadvertent poisonings from fentanyl,
Right.
which is making its way into our opioids.
Yes.
And you know, the prescribing and all of that going on. We want good,
Right.
healthier alternatives to opioids.
Right.
Marijuana is one of them, and the federal government has been treating it like it's this insanely harmful, dangerous,
Agreed.
risky substance. No one on earth can make an argument for why alcohol is legal and marijuana is
Right.
illegal. There's just it falls apart of minimum scrutiny.
And I will say, while we're in the process of saying, you know, black people, although black and white people use marijuana at similar rates and we are disproportionately arrested and incarcerated and prosecuted for it, the same is true of selling drugs. And I think that's important. When you look at currently, we have weed is legalized in many states, it's decriminalized in many states, and you see all kind of places, even like New York City, who are getting the cannabis license, white people being allowed to get these license lawful and sell weed and make entire businesses out of it. I can't tell you how many times I've seen my boy Seth Rogen doing all kind of cute stuff with weed, and you see it treated in this very not criminal, very friendly, very
Right.
understood, very socially accepted way, and at the same time, their entire communities still being plagued with the after effects
Right.
of not being given that benefit. So to me, it's important. I want to give Biden credit where it's due because, listen, I recognize it's a process. He's
Yeah.
come a long way from where he originally stood on marijuana, and I want to give that credit, but he's got to go further.
And Republicans should recognize that this is a decentralization thing.
Yes.
In part, like, let states that want to experiment with looser restrictions on
Right.
marijuana, that want to allow businesses to sell cannabis,
Right.
let them do that right now, because the federal government, the Biden administration currently,
Right.
has made that confusing and allowing for law enforcement and harassing of Americans who are just trying to
Right.
work.
Right.
Like, that is something Republicans should be against, and many are against. In fact, like, legalizing marijuana has
popular.
become very popular among
Incredibly
like
popular.
all segments of the population. So.
And I think it would help us address some of the issues we've been talking about. Like you said, the opioid crisis, the way our criminal system is, both those things, we could better address that if we didn't have marijuana being illegal and the
Right.
states followed suit. You could see them better regulated, create a market. They could not only make money, which we all know is important to our government, but they could also try and, intervene from some of these problems and these opioid issues and these fentanyl issues that they're so concerned about. They could better have a control over that if they actually got in the business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Vice President Kamala Harris was certainly gleeful to announce the Biden administration's change in policy.
The bottom line there is nobody should have to go to jail for smoking weed.
Well, that's interesting, but who could forget Tulsi Gabbard's infamous scorched earth approach to Kamala Harris during the 2020 primaries?
Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. That would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
And it's not really as if Kamala Harris has ever written off those policies or apologized for them or explained what changed in her thinking, because it really wasn't thinking. It was just, there's no ideology to her, right?
Yeah, listen, and I don't think this is just true of Kamala. I think this is true of many of our politicians.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
They do what they believe is popular, unfortunately, for most of our lifetime. And to some degree, it's changed a lot. There's a lot of pushback to what conventionally was thought of as tough on crime. But in not fairness, because I'm highly critical. I don't have nothing positive to say about Kamala's prosecutorial record, and I am not going to defend it, but I'm going to say, just in the very least, she was in the company of a world of politicians that just...
Everyone.
Exactly, she was. That being said, if times have changed, and if you are now changing your positions because, your base, your party, the country does not feel that way anymore, that's fine. I want you to do better. I'd rather you change and make change than be dogmatic about something just so you don't have to, wipe the egg off your face, but it's better to acknowledge it.
Exactly. When people criticize politicians for flip-flopping, I always say, well, which way did they flip?
Yeah, I want you
them
to change.
Flip in my direction. election.
Yes.
And then we can,
And I want to incentivize that. That's why I didn't come out here, talking about.
Yeah.
Because Biden's track record's not great when it comes to things like this, right? And neither is Kamala's. But I would much rather they try and make positive change than just stay the same way. So I'm going to incentivize that by not giving them a lot of grief at the top of this morning.
All right. Well, coming up next, I'll tell you what's on my radar. Stay tuned for that.